Brendan, talking about EVs, there's been a lot of discussion around EVs, and starting to see them come into the market. I think when Mark and I last looked, there were about 73,000 vehicles on the road, EVs. Are you starting to see any sort of volume coming through your auctions now? And what are the sort of prices looking at? How are they holding their value?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I talked about the average used car price in April last year was 50% higher than pre-COVID. It was 70% higher for an EV in April last year. So they climbed even higher, but there was a lot more volatility of used EV prices all the way through. They have also decelerated a little faster than we saw with ICE vehicles. So part of that is, there is more supply. For a long time, you're waiting 12 or 18 months for a Tesla, for instance, and then there was more supply of Tesla, and you get Polestar, and then all of a sudden, one of the other factors is there's some cheaper Chinese type entrants that have made their way into the market in the form of MG and BYD and other choice, Ionic and lots of other vehicles that have come into vogue. So I think that's put a lot of pressure on that. And also, one of the large OEMs who might remain nameless can send a tweet out and reprice their RRPs pretty rapidly these days, which is not typical behaviour of an OEM who has a very stagnant pricing methodology. So all of those factors in together, along with inflation factors and interest rate factors, I think have put a lot more pressure on that EV market. So it's just decelerated faster than, let's say, the ICE market might have. Yeah, we're seeing that a lot. We're not seeing a huge amount of volume though, John. So we're seeing, we might have 10 EVs that we'll see put up each week. A lot of interest. So we've got a greater penetration selling direct to consumer on a used EV than we do even hybrid and an ICE. So it's already good to see some strong uptake from consumers following the EVs coming through. So we've seen a really good role for ourselves with helping EV adoption over in the coming years. A lot of the governments and the fleets are into that, and that's part of their strategy with with their EV strategy was to obviously get into these vehicles, wear some of the depreciation, help and then resell those when they're coming off. So we're sort of working really closely with the governments to make sure that and the fleets to make sure we've got really easy channels for our customers to buy those from us. Because let's face it, there's probably a whole bunch of consumers out there that are doing it tough now. They own an ICE car. They want to get into EV. They don't have the 70 grand or the 60 grand to get into it, but they may have 30, may have 25. So I think it's the only way to really, increase adoption is through used EVs in the near future. So we see a really critical role for ourselves in that over the coming years. We know that they're coming. When we talk to the governments and the fleets, they're sort of saying, look, it's not right now, but within 18 months there will be this and that. So we will probably end up having dedicated EV sales, the national type sales that we'll put together. And just focus in a live auction that everybody can log in and bid. And the used EV buyers are so well educated. They probably know more about those cars than we do, to be brutally honest, because they're so well read. There's so much information on the net. If you've had 3 or 4, 5 Corollas in a row and you want to go and buy yourself a used Ionic, you're going to do a whole lot of work. You're probably going to have test driven it, all of that sort of stuff, and know it intimately, or a Model 3 or a Polestar, whatever it is. That they're so well researched on these cars, and they're buying with a lot of confidence, knowing what they're buying, and there's even more confidence. I think when it comes to buying, there's always been a little bit of a stigma about buying direct from auction. I don't know what I'm buying, but there's less servicing issues on those types of vehicles in the future, right? More about the battery, which we're working on some tech, battery health tech, and the likes as well. But, I think you're going to see a gravitation to used EVs with a lot more confidence in those vehicles because there isn't the servicing issues and the like that you see with typical ICE cars. So, yeah, we've got a really bright future. We're doing a lot of work ourselves, me personally as well, in that EV space to make sure we're across it, creating the right pathways, charge infrastructure. There's a whole range of things we've got to do to be ready for it. But lots and lots of really healthy and positive conversations with with our vendors around, their big EV pipelines that'll mature in the not too distant future.
John and I have always said, Brendan, the secret to EV adoption is actually to put low kilometre used EVs into the general market, because the innovators and early adopters are buying the new ones. But you're right, it's the thinking person who is mindful of their spend. They're the ones, that market is more than triple the size of the early adopters. These are the people that we need to get the cars to, and it's great that you're really proactive in that area. And I love the idea of that dedicated EV auction, because you're really going to get a lot of B2C or G2C activity happening with that, and it's great because they can then buy with confidence. A question I was going to ask you about the battery health checks. What's the tech coming with that? Because there's a bit of chatter about that. There's a bit of uncertainty. Batteries have always been a bit of a boogeyman when it comes to the EVs, but what can you tell us?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's not a lot of hardware suppliers out there with any kind of diagnostics. There's some limited providers out there. We've had some good conversations. None of it's within Australia; it's all overseas, and we've got a few devices we're testing right now to help us diagnose. And ultimately, we want to be able to create an awareness for the customer that's buying. So if they can see there's a battery health score of X%, and it's got a range. If the car came out of the factory with 400 range, it's now 3 years, 60,000 Ks, it's got 350 range. Oh, and the battery health score of 85%. That's probably tick. That's all I need to know. I'm happy to go, because if I'm buying it at 4 years of age, I've still got 4 to 6 years OEM battery warranty on that anyway. So there's a lot of confidence that'll come with the OEM battery warranty. But, us being able to say, here's an independent battery health score, that's what we're trying to work towards. There's also, a need from the fleet managers. They will need to understand how, potentially how those batteries have been charged, and has there been a contribution if the battery has degraded rapidly and it's because of incorrect charging, and then how do we help them price what that looks like? So there's a whole bunch of stuff to learn in that environment, but we're doing a lot, and it's just good to have good people in my team that are invested in understanding that, and that just working with good tech providers. This is very much emerging, and giving them constant feedback about, hey, we're doing this test, and we can it's working on these cars but not as well on these cars, and a whole bunch of different things we're working through with them. So it's good, nice to be doing things. Probably, there wouldn't be too many people doing these things in Australia right now. So it's nice to be looking at that. And every customer we talk to about it is like, oh, that's fantastic. We need to know about that. Just make sure you're keeping us in the loop. And because it may just come down to, education for their staff or their client as to what they've done in the past and how they may have contributed or may not have contributed to that battery. And for us, it's probably more about how do we provide confidence to that consumer or the trade buyer as to what the state of health is and the range on that car. So it's really cool. Yeah, it's been really interesting. A really interesting time of learning for us. Looking at this kind of tech.
No, what was quite interesting, we're talking to someone out of Finland, and they've been, since 2012, 90% of all vehicles sold were EV. So they're starting to get a lot of volume coming through now, 10, 12-year-old. And he said what was quite fascinating is the prices have decreased to about €5,000, and they just bottom out at that €5,000 level. Even though the mileage available on the battery is like 80 Ks, and they said people are buying them, they've got solar panels on their roof, and they use it as a second car just to take their kids to school or buy groceries and that. So he said that's quite fascinating that it just decreased and then it flattened out at this €5,000 level. He said he doesn't know why 5,000, but that's what it seems to have bottomed out at.
Yeah, there's I think in Hungary there's a used EV vehicle incentive scheme, right? So I think it's the only country globally that does it, right? So as a result, the trade buyers out of Hungary are buying from all over Europe, and they're really, they can punt harder on any EV than anyone else because they've got this incentive and they've got a strong consumer demand for used EVs in that particular country. So, I think there could be some things that Australia could look at in that space, to again, help with that used EV adoption. But yeah, there's so much information out there on the net about EVs, and it's all across LinkedIn and the like, trying to decipher what's right, what's wrong, what's true, what's not is pretty tricky.